Hello. Hello again. Still at MiniDebConf Toulouse, still in Capital de Libre. We will welcome Helmut Grohne now. He's a long-time Debian contributor, maybe Debian developer for 10 years, working on cross-build. He's going to talk about user move, no, cross-building now. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm talking about cross-building as I had a spontaneous talk about cross-building in Kosovo, and I figured I could structure it a better way and have to answer less questions between them. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce myself, which I'm not normally doing, because I actually got into this when I wrote my diploma thesis, where I was using Agda on a laptop that couldn't do more than 2 gigabytes of RAM, and I figured maybe I could just bootstrap x32 to cut down in pointers. I eventually got into bootstrapping and cross-building and never left that yak. And since then now I'm working for Frixion, and Frixion is generously funding part of my cross-building work now. Thank you. So, first obvious question, what is cross-building? Most commonly you have one machine and compile for another, and the interesting part is that their architectures tend to differ. The CPUs are sufficiently different that you can't run the thing on one on the other, right? Easy enough. When is cross-building useful? The most common use case is you have a fast machine and you build something for a slow one. The other common use case is architecture cross-bootstrap, which is when you want to get the initial set of packages for a new Debian architecture. It sounds like this is rarely done, but on average we are doing it about once a year. So it's rather more frequent now. And then we have the issue that compilers tend to use ever more RAM, and that means they also need address space. And some of you maintaining bigger packages may have noticed that your compiler runs out of address space on 32-bit architectures. So this is also something that can be solved with cross-building, as your compiler can then be a 64-bit executable. Common question for cross-building, what is build host target? Unfortunately, the answer is not that easy. Multiple different projects that have different ideas on what those mean. Debian and GNU happen to agree on build being the machine you perform the build on, and host being the machine where you actually end up running stuff. And then there also is target, which you almost never need unless you're writing a compiler. That's what your compiler does stuff for. But most of the time when you see target in a Debian package, it probably is wrong, unless it's GCC. Common question, how to cross-build a package? No, you don't need to set up a separate change root. The normal change roots just work. It's a matter of passing the right flag. So if you go drive dpackage, build package directly, of course you have to install your build depends in the right way, but if you use sbuild or pbuilder, you append that flag, and it magically just works, if it just works. Which leads us to the next question. When does it work? We have around 60% of packages which have satisfiable cross-build dependencies. This may sound little. We would assume that packages tend to have installable build dependencies. This is not the case for cross-building commonly. Multi-arch issues are preventing that in a number of cases, and yeah, that's where we are. This leads us to packages actually being cross-buildable around 50% of the archive. So most of the time a package has satisfiable build depends, it actually ends up being cross-buildable. If you are interested in a particular package, there is this service where you can check. Maybe I can demo it quickly, if that happens to work. It's not moving. No. It doesn't like me today. Didn't move. Great. We continue without. You can just check that website on your local browser, insert your favorite source package over there, and then you see something about your package being buildable or not. Beware that many of the cross-build problems reside in other packages. That's not the one you're looking at. So it's a different package to fix. This is a more porter-centric than maintainer-centric view. Speaking of when it tends to work, things that tend to work well are auto tools, because they have been doing it for a long time and properly differentiate build host. CMake has received a bit of work, thanks to Timo and Jochen. DH Auto stuff has received lots of fixes, thanks Niels. So very many of my patches actually do replace this custom invocation with DH Auto something, and then it magically works. Maison got it mostly right, thanks Yossi and Eli. Then the package config was a bit of a slow start. It now works, thanks Andre. We have arranged the package in a strange way where the binary package config is no longer in the package you install, but it only contains a symlink, and that makes it magically work. Rust crates magically work thanks to Mr. Fabian, who's doing all it, and I have no clue why it works. Speaking of Rust crates, you may notice that they are all containing source code in architecture, any packages. And that's actually a requirement that came from cross-building. If they were architecture all, it wouldn't work. Because oftentimes we need to transfer the architecture constraint through these packages, and that's something architecture all packages cannot do. Stuff that works sometimes. There is a G-Object and glib, and if you're interested more in that, Simon did a tremendous amount of work on that and presented on it in Cambridge this year. So I'll skip all of that. That's the talk of Simon. Perl extensions work somewhat. There was quite a bit of work on Nico, Dome, and Gregor, making all of the Perl extension packages gain a new dependency that would fix many of them, but not all. Python extensions tend to work if you put up with the right dependencies and use DH Auto stuff. And in the Qt ecosystem, it's a bit hit or miss, because every time something new gets updated, it initially is broken, but with Lissandro and Dimitri, I have good support making it work eventually. It just takes a bit of time. So some things work, some things don't. Stuff that doesn't work well is Clang and LLVM, because they have a different model where you don't configure your compiler for a particular architecture, but you select the target at runtime. And that's badly matched in Debian at this time. And also the packaging is not like expressing multi-arch constraints in a way that works well for cross-building at this time. Go has a similar problem. It has two Go compilers. They also have one that does this target at configure time and one that does this target at runtime. Matching that up doesn't work yet. Haskell I attempted looking into, but it's difficult. Help to man is generally something that doesn't work at all because it's running stuff at build time. If you want to help cross-building, please do avoid help to man. I see no way of fixing that. OCaml and R are something. Do you have any experience on that? You can sit down with me. And if you see any package using XMKF, MF, or IMAC, please make that build system go away. It's completely unfixable. Makefiles tend to work better. When would you use cross-building? Speeding up large builds. I know that quite a number of people are using it to build the Linux kernel. Thanks, Ben, for making that work even better. So if you do ARM development, that's a quite common thing to do. Whenever we are rebuilding much of unstable for pack and BTI is a bad time to use it, because then all the packages are being rebuilt and the different architectures are out of sync. And then you get co-installation issues all around. So at that time, maybe use Trixie or something, but unstable is in a bad shape when that happens. I think we are done with it now, so you can resume your cross-building activities. Cross-building is useful when you are doing a time64 transition, and you notice that your ARM packages can no longer be built, and you need to re-bootstrap them. It's a partial architecture bootstrap. It was used at that time, even though it was partially broken then. When you can easily build natively, maybe don't go for cross-builds, because you can't do these configure checks for some of the things where you exert runtime behavior. So many of the packages do some guesswork and occasionally get that wrong. So your cross-builds may differ from native builds. And if you have, I can just set up an ARM64 machine doing the builds, then you should probably prefer that to cross-building. And of course, when you are adding a new architecture to Debian, cross-building is something you very much need. You may extend the answers if you like. No, okay, let's move on. What to do when it doesn't work? That's a lot of things you can do, so I categorize that into 3 things. The first part here is satisfiability issues. And that's when S-build or P-build say, I attempted it, but I couldn't just install stuff. Thing to do, number 1, is drop unused build depends, because it's easy and then it occasionally fixes your problem. Just look, do I need that? Then moving build depends to build depends in depth helps. Cross builds always are arch-only builds. So everything that's in build depends in depth is completely irrelevant to cross-building. A very common thing to do is have a documentation package, it's arch-all, and move all of that around. And then it magically works. Sphinx is something where that is often applied. GTK doc is something where that works. Doxygen doesn't need it as much because it tends to just work. Annotate build dependencies with no check. We've been doing that for a while. It means that if you turn on the no check build profile, which skips testing during your build, then you also don't need these dependencies to be installed. And we can't do any testing because we can't run the thing, which is one of the reasons where you would want to avoid cross-building if you can do it natively, because you can't do any testing when you cross-build, right? You need to do your testing on the target or whatever. So annotating dependencies helps a lot. You see, it's much about getting rid of build depends, yeah? If you're faced with the Python extension, the current way to do it is changing the Python def dependency into 2 dependencies, one of which has lib prepended and the other one has :any appended. And then it tends to work. libtool-bin is a long-running story. I think we discussed that almost 10 years in Paris, where libtool was split into libtool and libtool-bin. It's few packages that still use libtool-bin, because the common way is to have configure, and that's generating your libtool, which is when you don't need libtool-bin, because you're generating a correct one at build time. The libtool-bin package contains a pre-configured one for a build architecture that equals the host architecture, which is not what we can do in cross-building. So any package that build depends on that doesn't work. And if that still isn't enough, a number of packages that you may see as being not satisfiable, you can just walk to tracker Debian org. It displays multi-origins, and occasionally you'll find, oh, I can just mark that package multi-org foreign, and then it'll work. That's one of the things where the fix for cross-build failure is not in the package you're looking at, but in a different package. Rather frequent thing with cross-building. Now moving into actual failures. We have gotten to a point where build dependencies were installable, and now something failed. I already mentioned DHauto. Yeah, use that more often, and then things magically work. Common mistake is configure, not passing --host. DHauto configure does it for you. CMake, not appending the right flags. DHauto configure does it for you. Whatever. It's all the same way. So try to not replace it, but append your flags. Perl extensions. If you have a Perl extension failure, you occasionally get a nice message from deb helper telling you, if you want to cross-build this, you probably should be installing Perl XSDEF. That's the Perl way now, thanks to lots of effort, to express, I'm building a Perl extension module. It's a virtual package at present, it may become a real one, but it's what makes it work. You're expressing your intention in build depends now, and the Perl layout can choose to implement that in a way that makes cross-building work. Avoid AC run if else. That's the autoconf one. It works roughly the same way in CMake, where you also have to avoid it, because, well, you can't run it, repeating pattern throughout the talk. We have a lot of alternatives. AC check size off is one of them. If all you want to do is determine the size of a type, there is a fancy way where the AutoTools constructs strange arrays that may have a negative size and figures out whether GCC or whatever would compile that, and then does a binary search to narrow in on what the actual number is. And it only does that for cross-building, so if you do a native build, it'll actually just write a program that computes the number and runs it, because that's faster than. That's also what drives AC compute int for getting arbitrary compile time constants. AC check declaration is something that tends to work in lots of places. And we also have AC link if else if you don't actually need to run stuff. I think roughly half of the times I see an AC run if else, I can replace it with something else. And the other half is, maybe try adding a cache variable where a cross-builder can supply the result. That is a workaround, kind of. Yeah, using package config is great. It tends to just work. But in order for it to work, you need to use the right one. And that's not bare package config, but the interpolated variable package config. And in autoconf, that's package check modules, a macro provided, and it'll automatically pick up the right one. If you just do the bare one, you get the build architecture one, and that tends to not find your dependencies. If you use any tools like GCC directly in your Debian rules, use the CC variable instead and include this package configuration file, as it will set up all these variables, including package config and a number of other ones, in a way that will make it just work for cross-building. Yeah, so this is the most common ways to fix actual cross-builds. Sure, other ways. And if all of that doesn't work, we have one more. Disable GTK doc. Great. GTK doc has a scanner that runs host arch code, and that tends to give you some kind of exec format error or whatever. And commonly, though, the documentation is already split into architecture-independent packages. So all that we have to do here is not run it. That's really a lot of patches doing just that. Moving into generic advice. Relatively simple advice is, if you have a package that isn't cross-buildable, consider checking the bug tracker. It may have a solution for you. I think roughly 10% of cross-build failures do have a patch in the BTS. So chances aren't that bad. If you figure your problem may be repetitive, use code search. Maybe someone else has already solved it for a different package, and you find a solution there. At least that's what I'm doing in a lot of cases. And that's something that also tends to work for other kinds of problems that are not cross-building. And if all of that didn't help you figure out your cross-building issues, go via email or IRC. And I think really all of the questions that have come up lately, even if it was like, can you make my package cross-buildable, have received a reasonable answer lately. So that's something to consider. If you are interested in making stuff cross-buildable, just contact us. It's me and a few others doing occasional work. So support tends to just work. And now we are moving into the more interactive part, your questions.
Hi, Helmut. Thanks a lot for all your work. I need to say it first because, I have a set of questions. First, thank you for all the patches you're supplying. I try to upload your patches as fast as possible, which means about 24 hours if I manage, but at least 1 week. And I think this, because it's so easy to apply his patches and help, well, not only Helmut, but I think it became somehow obvious that it makes some sense to have cross-buildable Debian. And so if we are doing something for it, yeah. I have some remarks. Help to man. I've seen a lot of packages which are using help to man or other ways to create man pages for extremely old code which will never change. So if you just run help to man once, put in the Debian directory, and have you even save the environment by not always calculating the man pages which will not change. A real question for you, you said R packages are hard. I'm quite into R packaging. Do you have any hints what we can do?
Let me step back to help to man first.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So if you look into help to man, first check, is your package actually architecture dependent? If it's architecture all, then just use help to man. It's fine. And if it is architecture dependent, then yes, recording the output is the same way, and you can also edit it at that time, making it more useful.
Yeah. This is, I have also a script which calls help to man and edits more or less automatically edits the output to make it more sensible. So it makes sense in any case to look at the output and not just randomly throw the output into your binary.
Resuming to R, there's a showstopper right at the beginning, and that's a very fundamental R package helper that's not marked multi-arch foreign, and that means every single R package is currently unsatisfiable. Just adding multi-arch foreign seems like a simple thing to do, but it's often wrong. So, given my lack of understanding of R, I've never dared to add that, and that means we can't try it all. So it's basically me and someone doing R, sitting down for an hour and making it work. Combining the cross-build specific knowledge with the R specific knowledge, and then we move forward.
So you should down at some point in time. Sit down.
Just contact me here or after the conference, and we'll make that work.
Okay, cool. Next question, because you said remove build depends. Do we have maybe some tooling which said check what build depends are really needed? And then
I call it reproducible builds.
okay.
You can drop dependencies, figure out whether it still builds the same thing, and if it did, the dependency likely was only useful for testing or not at all.
Yeah. And final question, what is the best answer to a maintainer who says, my package does not need to be cross-built?
I have no clue, I ignore them. Because it's just so many other packages that you can just cross-build.
Okay, I wanted to have a good answer for this, but okay. Thank you.
On the help to man one thing I've sometimes seen for that and other similar, I have to run stuff on the native architecture in order to figure out what to do issues is to perform two builds, so native plus cross, and then you extract. Then you can run help to man in the native side and install it in the resulting package. Do you have an opinion on that practice? It doesn't seem very well supported, but one can make it work sometimes.
I've actually done it for a select few packages that have very limited build dependencies and build quite quickly. So very small command line tools. I tend to just build twice, once for help to man and once for real. Yes. Another option is to have a recursive build dependency on yourself. So you can just say, I need myself to build whenever I'm cross-building by appending the cross-build profile without negation. So in normal cases, you won't pull yourself to build, so you don't impede bootstrapping. But then once you cross-build, you just install the tool you're about to build for the native architecture, the build architecture. Then you can run it there, hoping that the output is the same between build architecture and host architecture, and then include the man page for that.
Debian never ceases to surprise me. Great.
A big thank you for this work, because in my experience, and I understand not just my experience, it makes Debian excellent for building stuff for embedded and whatnot. A lot of stuff just works out of the box, unfortunately Qt, which would be the main thing. I used it for a customer of mine. The bigger deal was co-installability of build dependencies. So sometimes you can cross-build, but your devel library for the foreign architecture doesn't install together with the host architecture. You may need both, because you're building once for the host and once for the build architecture. So I had to make like a chroot with Debian to build a thing, but then you can install the same dependency. You can reuse the tooling to set up the devel machine for both things. It mostly just works, except damn Qt sometimes.
Except?
For damn Qt sometimes, but that also mostly works, actually. So yay, and thank you. I think we could do a lot more marketing of Debian as a build environment for serious embedded stuff this way.
Yeah, well, feel free. So Qt is something where we have active bug reports of packages being wrongly marked multi-arch foreign and stuff. It needs some work. It has patches. It's mostly starved on contribution time. It needs someone to upload. And we know Alessandro and Dimitri are doing an awesome job, but they also said they'd like to quit and reduce their involvement. It's, as usual, any ecosystem is lacking manpower. More questions?
You mentioned GObject earlier as rarely building. I suppose it's because of the GObject introspection generation, mostly. And would the solution here could be that packages generating GObject introspection data could just implement the Node.js profile so that this is not done on cross builds, but only on native builds?
Yes, of course. I mostly skipped that because Simon's talk is way more detailed on all of this. And of course, if you want to do G-object introspection related stuff, many times you don't need the GRR files, and activating the Node.jr profile for your specific use case to build a reduced package is just the way to go and make it work. And on the other front, we now have a package, thanks Niels, and Simon, of course, that is cross-exif wrapper, which provides a command line tool to wrap another binary and execute it for that architecture. And if you do a native build, it'll just pass through. And if you do a cross build, it takes care of installing QEMU user and running it through that. So at this time, some of the G-object and GRR cross builds will actually just work.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your work on cross-building. It's very useful. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, everyone, for asking questions. See you soon. Thank you.